Baruch Hashem, 7 years ago, we had this chus as a family to make Aliyah to Beit Shemesh. And in the first, I think it was the first month and a half of living in Beit Shemesh, we lived on the end of a block, right in front of our house. We had some crazy guys graffiti the sidewalk with their political message that they wanted to share with the world. And I was very upset by it, and I called a couple people, and I asked, what I was these guys painting on the sidewalk, and they said, there's this guy, Dov Lipman. Give him a call. He also is involved. He's very upset about some of these things that are going on. Maybe he'll help you out. And I think it might have been maybe 2 years that we did. 3 out of 5, 3 out of 6 Fridays, Dov Lipman and I would be sitting on the sidewalk painting over graffiti. Mamash, the two of us by ourselves. And people would come and give a comment, and they would start to talk, and most of them talked to him because he looked more the part, a little closer to them than I did. But that really, to me, was the beginning of a lot of activism on Dov's part, and he'll tell you probably a little bit more, and if we get to meet him when we're in the Knesset visiting, we'll get to see the famous rock, which I've seen. But I've known Dov since then, and from that meeting, I can tell you personally that his activism and his attempts first to bridge a bond between the various demographic communities in Beit Shemesh, but his refusal to allow fanatics and extremists to have their way has cost him, at that time, had cost him. I know it cost him Parnassa. I know I personally witnessed people threaten him physically. But he stood strong, and he stood very focused upon making sure that everyone had a safe place to live without having to be threatened by extremist people. People know a lot of things that happened, and they've heard a lot of things that happened in Beit Shemesh a couple of years ago. Dov was at the forefront at that time also of making sure that people were able to live in safety and without threat to their lives. And he's, through his activism, he was able to get involved with the Yesh Atid party, and he was, for our benefit, he was elected to the Knesset in the most recent elections. I'm very, very happy that I'm able to call him a friend from before. Wasn't really a bandwagon jumper, but really from before. And it's my pleasure and kavod to introduce my friend, Rabbi Dov Lipman, Chaver Knesset Rabbi Dov Lipman, to share some thoughts with us.
Thank you, Shmuel. I mentioned to Shmuel when we were standing outside that there are moments when I really do think about going back to the spraying the graffiti days, because it's a little bit surreal to look at where we are now compared to where we were then. I just want to explain it to you for a moment, and then I do want to actually get into the topic that I really wanted to address to all of you, and also give you time for questions. But they actually relate to one another. In all the issues that we've had in Beit Shemesh, and you can go to any video you want or any news article you want, you will never see me quoted as saying that the people who were putting graffiti or the people who were attacking anybody were Haredim. You will never see me saying that because from the beginning I felt like we're dealing with crazy, extreme people. The average Haredi you see on the street would not go and spray paint someone's wall or sidewalk, and they would not go and attack someone. And you should, while you're here and while you're learning, you should go and spend Shabbatot with Haredi families amongst other families, and you'll see the most wonderful people. And we never wanted this, and Shmuel and I were in this together. We never wanted this to be a battle between one type of Jew and another type of Jew. This was a battle against people who were extreme, but people who really were interfering with our lives. It was very hard to move to Israel and all of a sudden see these kinds of issues, and people literally spray painting on our sidewalks and on our walls about how the women should dress or how the women aren't dressing properly or the like. That's what really got this started in terms of any connection to politics. I'm not a politician. I didn't have aspirations to, when I moved here, to become a Chaver Knesset. First of all, I would have thought it was impossible. Both Hebrew-wise, I would have thought it was impossible, and also on Knesset TV, you see how Chaver Knesset yell at each other and scream at each other and interrupt each other, and I couldn't ever imagine doing that. In 9 months, I've learned how to do that, for better or for worse. But it was really an outcome of just standing up in our community and saying that we're not going to tolerate this. There's right and there's wrong. And there's no justification anywhere for taking a can of spray paint and going and damaging whether city property or people's property. There's no justification anywhere. You have an issue with how someone is dressed. We can talk about it. We can discuss, is there anything to change or not? I personally am against telling other people what to do or forcing other people. But there's ways that we deal with issues, and spray painting or throwing things or becoming violent is certainly not that way. And we stood up and we tried to do something about it. And then things sort of dominoed to the point that I got involved politically, and thank God today I have the unbelievable honor to serve as a Chaver Knesset. We'll talk more about that at the end. The thing that bothered me the most out of what I was seeing in Beit Shemesh, but in Israel in general, was, I learned in Yesh Atid in Baltimore, and well over 80% of the guys in yeshiva went to university at the same time. And we learned Torah from what I experienced at a very high level, hours and hours every day. But we also received an education, and we were prepared for various careers. In my situation, it was in education. I have a master's in education from Johns Hopkins, while I also have smicha from Ner Yisrael. But all of my friends learned a lot of Torah, and they also were trained. And I have friends today who are doctors and lawyers and accountants and businessmen and all over the world in different places. And it's all rooted, though, in their experience in yeshiva. And not only did I not see it as a contradiction, I really saw that one enhanced the other. And when I came to Israel and started getting involved a little bit in these issues and seeing the extremism, again, from an extremist group, not in any way representative of the broader Haredi community, but I saw the broader Haredi community not really part of Israeli society and very much isolated and becoming more and more so. And that for me was a real concern. And as I got to talk to Chilonim more and understand the second community in Israel, I started realizing how much damage this was doing to the image of Torah and the image of religion throughout Israel. Because people will say, that's Torah, Judaism, being isolated and not being part of broader society. And people were very troubled by this, and I thought to myself, I want to be part of a movement, some way or another, which is going to help bring about a change, to help the Haredi community reach a point where we in no way, try to create a scenario where people are less religious or people aren't Talmidei Chachamim, but to find a way to somehow create that balance. And that takes me to one of my heroes in the Torah, and that is Yosef HaTzaddik. And we're really finishing the story of Yosef these weeks, and I really want to take a step back for a moment and analyze. And this is something which I remember bothering me when I was younger, and the question which everybody has to ask, and that is, let's grow up now and think about it as B'nai Torah, as adult B'nai Torah. What in the world happened between Yosef and his brothers? By show of hands, how many of you have siblings? You have siblings? Okay. By show of hands, how many of you have had tension with your siblings in your lives? Okay. You have tension with your siblings. By show of hands, how many of you decided to sell your children into slavery because of those tensions?
I don't have children.
Okay. Right. We don't take our sibling disputes and maybe we've thought about selling them into slavery, but actually take action and do it. We don't do that. It's not a normal thing to do. What is this dispute about? This can't just be some kind of a petty sibling rivalry where Yaakov favored Yosef and the brothers were upset about this. It doesn't make any sense. We have to understand what really happened and what can we learn from it. In order to do that, let's go back to the very beginning of the story. And I'm not going to be quoting Mefarshim through all of what I'm saying. For the most part, I'm using the approach of Rav Hirsch to understand a lot about the relationship between Yaakov and Esav, but I'm just going to talk about it in sort of story form instead. Yitzchak Avinu has two sons, Yaakov and Esav. And according to many, many different approaches and many Mefarshim, the idea was there were going to be two forefathers to basically establish the Shvatim. You were going to have Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov is going to be essentially the spiritual father for the Jewish people, and Esav is going to be the physical father, the father of Olam Hazeh. And yes, we have to have an Av, someone who's going to guide us regarding how do we function in a very physical world. And that's the idea. And because of that, Yaakov and Esav have very different natures. Yaakov's nature is to be the Ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim, who sits and just focuses on religious pursuits and on learning Torah. And Esav is the person who's sort of out there, the Yesh Atid, the person who's out there and knows how to function in a physical world. And again, without going through all of the details, in the end, it turns out, now Rav Hirsch actually talks about this as being a failure on some level of parenting in Yitzchak and Rivka in terms of not recognizing Esav's nature and really guiding him the way they should. But in the end, Esav is too much involved in the physical world. He has no way of balancing the two. And now all of a sudden, Yaakov Avinu, who is this Ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim, who is only focused on the spiritual, now he has to become the father of both realms, of both the spiritual realm and the physical realm. He really shows his ability to do that, first of all, in the test with Yitzchak when he steals. Okay, many Mefarshim will understand he didn't actually steal it, but it was much of a charade, but takes the brachos from Esav, and then he's off to Lavan. And in Lavan's house, he has to function in a very physical world. He's working, and he's working, and he's working, and he's there for years, and now he returns back to Eretz Yisrael. And a very strange thing happens. Very strange. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav el Esav achiv. Yaakov is coming back to the land of Israel. Esav is off in Har Seir. Esav is not paying any attention to Yaakov. Esav has started his life. He's flourishing over there. We have a long list of all the alufim, all the great heroes and the leaders and the princes that develop in Esav's kingdom. There's no reason at all for Yaakov to make contact with him. The Medrash even says that Yaakov making contact with Esav is, imagine a scenario for a moment where you're walking by and you see a dog which is scary to you. There's a dog on the road, there's on the sidewalk, and most people, if you see a dog that's scary, you walk the other way. But you, as someone who's scared of the dog, walk up to the dog and start tugging on the dog's ear. That's what the Medrash says. Yaakov is tugging on the dog's ear by awakening Esav and bringing Esav to the table. Esav wasn't involved at all. Why did he do that? And it's very clear as you look through the story, Yaakov Avinu is very concerned. He just spent all this time with Lavan, all this time involved in work, and now all of a sudden he's going to come back to Eretz Yisrael. How much has he been impacted by it? How much has he become an Esav? How much is he grounded in Torah? How much has he lost in those years that he was away? And he comes back and he has this climactic meeting with Esav where he realizes, I'm okay. He sees the differences between Esav and himself. For example, Esav saying, Yesh li Rav, right? Esav says, I have a lot of accumulations, I have a lot of physical things, I want more. And Yaakov is able to say, Yesh li Kol, I have everything, I have what Hashem has given me. He realizes that even though he was very involved in the physical world, he's fine spiritually, and he comes Shalem. He's fine. He's fine. He's complete. He has this balance between the spiritual and the physical. Now it's time for Yaakov to essentially decide who is going to be the Av, who is going to take over for him as the leader of the Jewish people, and he wants to find somebody who has that balance. That's what he wants to have, somebody who has both the spiritual side and the physical side. And we know, looking at the sources, we know that Yosef was a person who was very much a part of the physical world. It talks about Yosef being a na'ar, and the Medrash says that he did ma'aseh na'arus. He was very, very focused on how he looked externally, how he walked, how his hair was, etc. He was very focused on these things. Yosef was a person of chen, right? Everyone who saw him saw this charm and saw a personality, and he was a person of the physical world. Yet Yaakov saw that Yosef also was someone who was spiritual. The brothers didn't see it that way. The brothers saw this Yosef as being a person who was so drawn after the physical world that he was going to be another Esav. He was going to be a person who was going to lead to their destruction. Remember, it says when the brothers were out and Yaakov came, Yosef came and he said, he's Bala Chalamot, right? And the Chazal say when they said he's Balach Halamot, he's going to bring us to Baal. He's going to lead us to Avodah Zarah. He's the worst possible leader that we can have. He's going to destroy the future of the Jewish people. And the truth is, the fear that they had wasn't unfounded. If we jump ahead for a moment to when they take Yosef out of the Nile after he's buried, and they bring Yosef's coffin out of the Nile to take him with them through the desert to Israel. So we know that LiveShiur, Yosef is the shur, he's this ox, LiveShiur, and the Midrash says that the tablet, which was used, which they threw into the Nile to bring Yosef's body to the surface, that same tablet was used to create the Egel HaZahav, to create the golden calf, because the character traits which Yosef had, being very physical in nature, those are character traits which can lead to Avodah Zarah, and it can lead to a golden calf, and it can lead to the greatest travesties for the Jewish people, and the greatest tragedy. It could be, if it's not harnessed the right way. So the brothers understood that Yosef had those capacities. They were nervous about Yaakov's choice, and therefore, not out of some simple sibling rivalry, but out of a deep concern for what's going to happen to the future of the Jewish people, they have to get rid of Yosef. They had to get rid of him, and that's what they did. And they felt that's the only thing we can do to save us, because our father has chosen the wrong person to be the leader. He's too involved in the physical. Let's fast forward. Yosef becomes the ruler of Egypt, the leader of Egypt essentially, and the brothers come before him. Now it's time for Yosef to decide, what am I going to do? Can I reconcile with my brothers? Can we find a way to get along with one another, or are we still going to be embroiled in that same battle? That same battle which says the brothers feel you have to be much more spiritual. Yosef feels you can be physical as well. We have that battle once again. What leads Yosef to ultimately say it's okay, and he can reveal himself in last week's parsha in Vayigash? He sees Yehuda. Yehuda was essentially the leader of the rest of the brothers, the person who very much represented this idea of being very spiritual. But he saw Yehuda in a different light. Yehuda actually acted in a very sophisticated way. According to Chazal, when Yehuda approached Yosef in Mitzrayim, it was done with all kinds of different innuendos in terms of fighting with him, in terms of making peace with him. He did it in a very diplomatic type of way, in a leader type of way. And Yosef says, you know what? Not only did he stand up for Binyamin, but he sees that the brothers are changed and they're willing to function in a very physical world, and therefore Yosef is ready to reconcile with the brothers because they seem to have understood the importance of this balance. What about the brothers accepting Yosef? How can they accept him? When Yosef says, Ani Yosef, when he says that, according to Chazal, the brothers want to kill him. This is exactly what we feared. We feared that Yosef was too involved in the physical. He was going to become pagan and lead the Jewish people the wrong way. And that's what happened. He's the leader of Egypt. And we want to kill him. But then Yosef goes through his beautiful speech where he talks about how Hashem was involved in all of this and how this is all the Yad Hashem. And all of a sudden the brothers say, wait a minute. Yes, he's very physical. Yes, he's the leader of Egypt. But my goodness, look at that balance, where he's able to be the leader of Egypt, but yet recognize the Hashgacha Pratit, recognize on God's hand in everything. This is not the Yosef that we feared, and now all of a sudden they're able to reconcile and come back together again. Preparing for Hanukkah every single year, I learn a wonderful sefer, or basically an approach to understand Hanukkah by Rav Matas Weinberg, and he explains, there are sources throughout Chazal that talk about Yavan, that talk about Greece being something very special, right? For example, just as an example, we know that in Masechtas Megillah it talks about that the language that you can write a Sefer Torah, you can write a Sefer Torah in Hebrew or in Greek. The Gemara, I believe in Sota, says when you're in the land of Israel, speak either Hebrew or Greek. Sources that talk about Yavan being on a very, very high level in terms of spirituality. And yet, on the other hand, it's the greatest darkness. How do we understand that? So it depends. If it's the physical world, just for the physical world self, then it's darkness. But when you combine it together with spirituality, that's when you have the greatest, right? The Hiddur mitzvah of taking something physical and using it for a mitzvah, that's where you really have the greatest beauty. And he points out that Tzion, right, this goal of ours, right? Tzion is the letter Tzadi, which represents the Tzaddik, together with Yavan. It comes together, that's Tzion. That's the most beautiful thing there could be. People who combine spirituality together with their involvement in the physical world. It's very easy, or not easy, but it's simple to say, I'll just focus on spirituality with no challenges whatsoever. Just get rid of all challenges in the physical world and give me just spirituality. That's not a challenge in terms of a purpose to be alive. That's not a challenge to overcome. The whole point is to be involved in Olam Hazeh, to be involved in the physical world, and yet remain spiritual. And that's why we do spend years in yeshiva preparing ourselves for that moment when we go out and we now have to be walking Sifrei Torah in the sense that Torah is with us everywhere, and yet we function in that physical world. You know, at the beginning of Parshas Bechukosai, in every single yeshiva, and possibly even this one, in Parshas Bechukosai, the Mashgiach Ruchani, the Rosh Yeshiva, gets up and gives the same drasha, or a similar drasha. Because it says, in Bechukosai Telechu, and according to Chazal, what is the challenge to receive the brachos versus the klalos? Shatiu amelim b'Torah. That you should be amal Torah. If you're amal Torah, then you receive the blessings. If you're not amal Torah, then you receive the curses. And therefore, it's an opportunity to talk in yeshiva about the importance of being amelim b'Torah. My Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg Zatzal, had a different approach to that Chazal. And he said it's not Shatiu amelim b'Torah as one phrase, but it's Shatiu amelim, comma, b'Torah. That whatever you're involved with in your life, it has to be with Torah, with learning Torah, with keeping to the Torah, with the spirit of the Torah. And that makes a lot of sense, that all the blessings and curses should be dependent on how I'm Amma. How am I functioning in the world? Is it with Torah or is it not? And that's really the great challenge. You know, when I studied the situation in Israel and looked at it, my first question was, where did this come from? Where did it come from that there's an ideology which basically says the goal for everybody is to sit and learn Torah and not go out and work? Where did that even come from? Because if you look, you guys are learning Gemara, you look through Chazal, they had jobs. The greatest Rabbanim, the greatest Rebbeim had jobs. And it's very clear, you can't ignore Shimon HaPakuli or Yochanan HaSandler. It's clear that they had jobs and they had other ways of making a living and they taught Torah. And so where did it come from? Right? I look at my history and my family in Europe, they worked. They were people who were Talmidei Chachamim, but they all went and found jobs, and people who were B'nai Torah, that was part of life, was that you go and find a job. So where did it come from? So it is something which is new. It is something which is an aberration, and it really comes from two places. One is, there was, and this is important to understand, because it's always important to know where the other side, so to speak, is coming from. There was a community living here in Israel, students of both the Baal Shem Tov and the Vilna Gaon, who were sent here, and they started in Tzfat. They also lived in Yerushalayim. Very, very spiritual. They sat and they studied Torah. They did not get involved in the building of the land of Israel. They were supported by the Chalukah, by money that was sent to them from Europe and other Jewish communities, and they got used to a certain way of life, where that's what they were sort of the spiritual pillars of the Jewish people throughout the world. In the late 19th century and beginning of the 20th century, when secular Zionism starts creeping into Israel and secular people start coming to Israel, their response was very much to circle the wagons and say, we won't have anything to do with this. Right? This is dangerous to our spirituality, and therefore we are separating ourselves completely, and therefore any thoughts of going out and being part of that world and working, it wasn't going to happen. But it goes even deeper. The Chazon Ish wrote in one of his letters that after the Holocaust, he said so much Torah was destroyed in the Holocaust that for 2 generations we need to push people to this ideology of only learning, rebuild Torah, and then of course the idea was we go back to the way it always has been, where people balance the two together. But we haven't gone back. And we live in a world where Torah has been rebuilt. Torah is everywhere. Look at the yeshivos that have been built. Torah is everywhere. We live in a world where you can be a huge Talmid Chacham and also be part of the world around you. I just look at my own experience. Again, my friends. I have friends. I was in chinuch. I was teaching for years. I have friends who are businessmen and lawyers who finish Shas more than once. And not just from a superficial daf yomi, but from learning every day and really being kovei to Torah. You know, it's interesting. The Gemara in Shabbos asks, what are the questions that were asked after we passed away? Pretty heavy question. When you're faced with the Ribono Shel Olam, what is he going to ask you? So you would think the first question should be, did you spend your whole life learning Torah and sitting in the walls of yeshiva? That's not. The first question is, were you honest in business? Were you honest in business? Is the first question. How can you see that Chazal and not realize that there's an expectation that we be out and making a living, and therefore you have financial interests and you have to make sure you're honest? The next question is, Kavati itim l'Torah. Not, did you find a way to learn Torah all the time? Did you set times to Torah? Did you have set times for learning Torah? It's the most important thing you can have in your life, is setting times for Torah, right? Both morning, night, and we'll talk about that in a moment. That's the second question. So that clearly shows this philosophy of combining the two together. There's actually a source that says that when the Torah says Sheishes Yamim Ta'avod, before talking about Shabbos, that's actually a mitzvah aseh from the Torah, that you're supposed to go and work. We know the Mishnah Pirkei Avos says, Kol Torah she'eni malacha. If you have Torah without work, without parnasa, that Torah is going to go away, and it's goreres avon. It's going to cause a sin. The Rambam goes a step further, and the Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah says that anybody who chooses to focus only on learning Torah and forces other people to support him, meaning put aside, if you have a lot of money on your own, or someone who's going to support you on your own, that's not your private arrangement, that's something else. But you force others to support you, the Rambam says that disgraces Torah, and that person loses his portion of the world to come. Because that person you're forcing other people, you're forcing tzedakah to support you, while you should really be combining the two together. And you can go further and further. The Shulchan Aruch clearly, you read the Shulchan Aruch clearly, he says, after you've davened in the morning, after you've learned in the morning, and then the person goes to work, he says it clearly, there's no doubt that is the ideology, which is what authentic Torah Judaism has always been about. Yosef is the one person who's called HaTzaddik, right? HaTzaddik is the person who combines the two together, that you're involved in that world, and you also remain spiritual the entire time. But there's a challenge, and that's what these years are about for you guys. The challenge is to really build yourself up enough Torah-wise that when you do go out to that world, and the world isn't easy to function in spiritually, to make sure that you really are rooted in terms of your Torah learning and in terms of your spirituality. You know, it's interesting. I used to be involved in the Torah world all day. All day I taught Torah. It was great. I love teaching Torah. I miss it. And that's what I did for a living. Now, all of a sudden, since the elections, I'm in a very different life, where I don't have Torah learning as my day, but I have to find those times to learn, and I treasure those moments where I can learn. I'll go one step further. I never appreciated Tfilas Mincha like I do now. Just a little shout out for Mincha. It's just unbelievable, because I go to work, and I'm busy, and thank God I'm blessed to work in an Israeli parliament, and there's 3 options for Mincha. And it changes my day, because it gives me a little bit of time in the middle of a busy day to sort of refocus, right? Focus on what it's all about, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and then be able to continue with the rest of my day. It's brilliant. It's brilliant, the idea of taking a pause and being able to do that. So your challenge right now, though, shouldn't be on the work side, right? But you should keep it in mind for sure. But your challenge right now is to build up the Torah side, because you need to build yourselves up to be Talmidei Chachamim, people who have a passion to learn, so that you are kovei in the Torah. And then, when the time is right, and you go and you combine the two together, that's the greatest Kiddush Hashem. That's the tzil. That's the Yosef HaTzaddik that we should all be striving for. And I really believe that we can bring that to Israel as well. Even though there's an entire society which doesn't see it that way, I believe if it's presented not in a way of, we don't want you to be religious, chas v'chalila. Not in a way of, we don't want you to learn Torah, chas v'chalila. But we want you to combine the two together. By the way, that applies to army also, which is a whole other discussion. But I'm very involved in all the legislation regarding the army. It's unbelievable the lengths the army is willing to go to bring people who are very committed religiously into the army. It's unbelievable what we're talking about now in terms of funds being designated to make sure that they combine the two together. But the idea of showing that not only you can have both, but you need to have both. There's no mitzvah to be impoverished. There's no mitzvah to have your children destined to be impoverished. The idea is to have both together. And therefore the challenge is really to find a way to build yourself up in Torah and then be that person who, even while you're out there and you're working, you're also giving shiur. And I understand that's being modeled here in the yeshiva, of people who come and teach who are also earning parnasa doing other things. That's the dream. That's the ideal. The ideal is to find a way, to find that balance between, on the one hand, filling yourself with Torah, following this idea of course, you have to have the Torah, but when you go out and you do whatever you're doing everything with the Ruach of Torah, with learning Torah, and making sure that you're also spreading Torah. Think for a moment what would happen in Israel, in Israeli society, if in the Haredi community, which is, thank God, a growing community, a community that's 1/10 of the population in Israel and will be far more in years to come, if that population, instead of being closed to itself, if all of a sudden we had an Israel filled with Haredi, doctors, lawyers, accountants, high-tech entrepreneurs, generals, it would be a different country. Because people would see the beauty of this balance of Torah together with being involved in the world. This chen that Yosef had would all of a sudden spread throughout the country. A lot of people say to me, and I'll close with this point, then I want to give time for questions. A lot of people say, Dov, that's stam chalum. It's just a dream. It's just a dream. In the Haredi community in Israel, people are hardened in their ways, and they don't want to be part of Israeli society. In the secular community, people are hardened in their ways, and they're not going to accept the Haredim. It's just a dream. It's not going to happen. This idea of unity, of people respecting each other, it's stam chalum. First of all, my answer to that is, it's already happening. It's already happening, and on a daily basis, I see it happening. And I work together with Haredim who are working on ways to find a way to have learning together with earning a degree, having general studies, going to find a job. It's happening, and it'll continue to happen. But I want to end with one little anecdote to sort of show what I think about people who say it's just a dream. Remember, Yosef HaTzaddik was also Baal HaChalamot. He was also just a dreamer, and you see the way things worked out okay. About 30 years ago, growing up in Silver Spring, Maryland, we used to go to the Russian embassy in Washington to demonstrate for our brothers and sisters who were behind the Iron Curtain at the time. It's a time we can't even imagine now in Israel because 1 million Soviet Jews came here and changed the face of the country. There was a time when they couldn't leave. They couldn't leave, and they were stuck and refuseniks, and they were put in prison or Siberia if they wanted to move to Israel. So we would go and we would demonstrate for them. One of those times we went to demonstrate, and I remember it like yesterday. They gave us signs to hold up. So I stood there. Okay? I was a good American kid. I wasn't thinking about world Jewry at the time. I was thinking about, will the Redskins win on Sunday or not? They used to win. Will the Redskins win on Sunday or not? So I stood there with my sign. And my sign said, Free Yuli Edelstein. That was my sign. Free Yuli Edelstein. You want to talk about dreams and about the impossible happening? Today I'm blessed to sit as a member of the Knesset, and the speaker of the Knesset is Yuli Edelstein. David HaMelech said, Shir HaMalot B'shuv Adonai Shivat Zion Hayinu Kechomim. We're like dreamers. It's all a dream. It all doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. 70 years ago, my grandmother, may she live and be well, was languishing in Auschwitz. And a few months ago, she found the strength and she came on a trip to Israel and she sat at my Knesset office and she said, this doesn't make any sense. A Jewish state, a Jewish parliament, my grandson in that parliament, it doesn't make any sense. All this doesn't make any sense. We take it for granted that we have our land back. We take it for granted that we have a government. We take it for granted that God will come to the Knesset and we have control of our own destiny. We decide, with God's help, we decide where we're going to go and what direction we're headed. That our sons serve in Tzahal, right? Tzvah Haganah Yisrael. We have the ability to defend ourselves. You look outside and you see trees growing. That's open prophecies coming true. Open prophecies that talk about while the Jews are gone from Israel, it'll be desolate, nothing will grow. We return, right? Ki nicham Hashem Tzion nicham kol chorvoteha, right? Everything starts to grow again. We're living in amazing times. We're living in amazing times, and therefore we have to believe that in amazing times we can do things which seem to be impossible. The first step is just a message to you guys, and that is, it might seem impossible. is it possible for me to become an absolute massive Talmid Chacham and also pursue whatever dreams I have in terms of my career? The answer is absolutely yes. And you see it day to day in Israel, you can see it day to day all around the world, Jews who are doing that, who spent the years that are necessary to learn, while at the same time studying whatever they were studying. It takes time, it takes effort, you can't be lazy, you have to work hard, but you can do it. And then to bring that message to the rest of Israel, to the rest of the Jewish people, where on the more religious side, they can realize I could be a Talmid Chacham and also be part of the workforce and pursue whatever dreams I have in terms of that. And on the more secular side, that you can have a lot of what you want in your secular lifestyle, but also bring Torah into that lifestyle. And that's the goal. That's the dream. I'm happy that you guys are in Israel learning to be able to, first of all, experience the miracles that are happening here on a daily basis and the dreams. And I want you guys to dream big and believe that you can be Talmidei Chachamim on the highest of levels. Believe that you can pursue your dreams in terms of your careers on the highest of levels. Combine both together, create families that will follow in that path, and inspire the world. Inspire the world to follow that path and really reach that goal of Tzil, and really reach that goal of Yosef HaTzaddik, of being that person who combines together the spirituality and the physical world, because that's without a doubt what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. That's without a doubt what authentic Torah Judaism has always been, and God willing, that's what all of us together will enable to be in the future as well. So thank you so much for the time, and if we have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. Yes?
Hi, I'm Mark Press from Richmond, Virginia, and I'm visiting, so thank you for coming and joining the school this evening. I have two questions and just an observation. So my first question is, so you educate us when you first started with regards to when we passed on with the first two questions, were the questions that were asked by the Rabban Shalom, and he said, we're fair in business, and then we study Torah. I'm just curious, were you fair to your fellow Jew? Would that be a question? I mean,
I almost feel sometimes that
part of Torah learning is Torah in action, and what did you do for your brother or sister always comes to mind.
Right.
Me.
I think, first of all, there's almost this derech eretz kadmon Torah, this given that you're going to be a person who's a mensch, and this given, and we see clearly in the world that we live in that it's not that way, and it's definitely something we have to focus on. But there's no doubt that our responsibility is to be a basic, decent human being in terms of how we interact. I'm going to go beyond what you said. Not just to our fellow Jews, but to non-Jews as well. I don't think, that the notion of Tzelem Elokim, of everyone being created in God's image, and the notion of our being an Or LaGoyim, the basis for that is how we act in terms of Derech Eretz. So there's no doubt that's something which is expected of us, and that's something which I think everyone has to work on, and it's also a challenge. But it's also, perhaps, as we see in Israel, one of our greatest failings in terms of just the ability to respect one another.
That's why I brought it up. So
yeah,
that's
for
number
sure.
one. The second question is, so you quoted the Rambam about it wouldn't be appropriate, for have someone support someone who didn't go and earn their keep. Did I hear that right?
Yes.
Okay, so now if we go back and we look at the relationship between the Torah Zachar and Zebulun, didn't one study and the other have ships to go and support his brother?
There's nothing wrong if someone has their own arrangement where, by choice, people are supporting them. There is an idea, by the way, I want to emphasize, of people who are the elite learners, people who are really anshe segula, as we call it, people who can really sit day and night. This is their only passion for the Am Yisrael to take care of those people. And by the way, even in our legislation for army service and things like that, we have that set aside, where that group is there. And we know the Chazal say that many tried to live like Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and failed, right? You can't, that's not the Hamon Am, the majority of people are not cut out to be able to do that throughout their whole lives as their only pursuit. But there is something important about Bnei Israel having people who do study Torah day and night. That's their only pursuit, and that's something which absolutely is a value.
So long as there is an arrangement, then it is.
Correct, but it's not a situation where a population is forcing others by their own choice, forcing others to be supportive. Correct.
That's the key.
Correct.
And
That's
finally, just an observation. I don't know, but very recently, I read, I learned, I heard, with regards to Mincha, that of the 3 times we have the opportunity to daven, that's the most difficult. You have to, like you point out, you have to pick yourself up and get away and stop, and recognize what's important. It's to be commended. That you taking yourself away from other things that are important and realize what's
Absolutely.
really the bottom line.
Absolutely, and it makes a big difference to the day.
So,
Person's involved in business.
Richmond's a very small community, so I have to pick myself up away from my desk. And everybody says, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Don't worry, I'll be back." So,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, sure. Yes.
Just curious if you could expand a little more on some of the challenges you felt you faced entering into a situation like Knesset, knowing full well that, for example, Knesset has a reputation of being, you mentioned at the beginning, the fighting, the tremendous amount of corruption in politics in Israel. Not that America's any different, but there's tremendous amount of corruption, Lashon Hara, Mosi Shemra. I mean, you're entering into a world of, and I'm not saying other careers don't have that as well, but I mean, I'm sure you could say there's a tremendous amount of backstabbing and things of that nature.
Yeah.
How you feel is from your background, how you can handle that kind of situation?
So the truth is, and I'm not here to give a political speech, so I'll dance around that, but I would not have entered politics if it was the way politics have always been in Israel, where it is very, even in the parties, there's a lot of corruption. There's certain old politics where people are just sort of prolonging their careers and not necessarily idealistic. I was very fortunate to fall into a position where it was a new party that was starting, people who are not career politicians, people who gave up. I'm one of the few people in the party who's making more money in the Knesset than I was before. Most of the people gave up lucrative careers in other areas because they really wanted to make a difference. And I was very impressed with their idealism. I was very impressed with their desire to make a change. I was very impressed with their desire to do things differently than they've been done in the past. So I felt comfortable, just at least even my own party, getting involved. Having said that, I'm going to be honest with you, one of the, people ask me, what have you learned since you became a member of Knesset? One of the things has been that a lot of the people there are not the way I thought they were when I was outside of the system. There are a lot of very good people, even people who I might disagree with me politically, but their intentions are so good and they really believe that what they want to do, what they envision is best for Israel, best for the Jewish people, and they really aren't as corrupt. There is definitely, there are definitely opportunities to be corrupted. Maybe that is because there are 120 members of Knesset, there are people pulling at you. And there are people pulling at you, and there are people who, there might be hints or the like of making things better for you or helping you. It does come up. You have to be very careful about it. Even in our party, for example, we have a policy, for the most part, because I'll explain why in a moment, but not to fly, let's say, business class when you fly somewhere. Right, which is in Israel, Chaver Knesset not flying business class. So I sit in economy, and people come over to me and say, "I don't understand. You're a Chaver Knesset."
We have that policy also.
But that comes from that idea of, you know what? Just because you're a member of Knesset doesn't mean magia li. Doesn't mean that everything is coming to me. And I think that's something which is a very important statement. The chairman of our party, who's the finance minister, he refused the driver and he refused the car. He drives himself, and he has the same car he had before. It's a nice car, but it's not being driven around in the luxury cars that other ministers are. And that also sends a very important message of, we're here to work, we're here to get things done, and it's not just about, and that you have to watch yourself though on a daily basis. And by the way, I'm sure this applies to people who are businessmen as well, in terms of the ability to cheat and the like. But again, you have to watch yourself daily. I'm constantly asking myself, am I going with the ani maamin that I started with? And am I going with the honesty? And the moment those red lines come, which I have set out for myself, if I'm going to be forced to cross those red lines, will I have the courage to walk away from it? I do believe I will. I've done it in the past in my life, and I do believe that I'll do it here as well. But you have to be constantly on alert for it. In terms of the screaming at each other, one of the things that people don't realize, if you watch the Knesset, there's the main room where we sit, and then behind that room, a room that nobody sees, there's a room with couches, and they serve us like coffee and tea, and there's some cake there sometimes and vegetables. And you can literally have 2 Chavrei Knesset. I'll use a classic example for Israel's sake. And a Haredi, hardline Chavrei Knesset screaming at somebody who's more secular, and they're screaming at each other. And then 10 minutes later, they're on the couches sitting together, have their grandchildren, how's this, making jokes, talking to each other, possibly even working together on some things. And it's a shame that broader Israel and the broader Jewish community doesn't see what's happening behind the scenes, because people only see what happened in the Knesset, and then they assume, oh, okay, so we're supposed to hate each other, we're supposed to scream at each other. And in reality, they don't hate each other. For political reasons, they're going at it in the Knesset, but there's a lot more working together and peace than people realize. So. Yes?
Your whole speech was basically about like mixing the two things together, like jobs and everything like that in Torah. I'm just curious, I've had this argument with people before, how would you word it? Would you word it that you have to fit your life into Torah, or you should fit your Torah into your life?
You should fit your
life. Or how do you feel about the entire conversation at all?
Well, I think that different people will come to it from a different place. And I can't force, I would come to it as Torah is life, spirituality, and we work together with it. That's part of that. You know what? It's part of Torah. It's part of Torah. It's not two separate medians which you have to find. It's part of it is that how God put us in a world and we work for a living, and He put Adam Rishon into Gan La'avda L'Shamra, and it's part of it. I wouldn't mind, though, for someone who's coming from a more secular perspective, for them to realize that in the world which they're in, they can also bring elements of Torah there as well. But I think that when you're in yeshiva, it's so critical that we understand the importance of these years being primarily, I want to explain myself in a moment, primarily to build yourself up in Torah. Because that's something which is very difficult to do afterwards. I don't mean, though, that when you're going to study in university, wherever else it is, you shouldn't do it fully. Whatever you're doing, you should do 100%. But I'm okay with the idea of most of the hours of my day being in Torah, and then I set aside X number of hours for college studies, and then over time, I develop my degree and the like. I'm totally fine with that, because I think that it's so important during these years to build yourself up in Torah. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to avoid the question, so if I didn't answer it, tell me.
No, it's just that I'm not sure if I conveyed what the basis of these kinds of arguments. It was the idea that what would give way in a way, in a matter of speaking, not that like, all right, I have to give up one or the other, but like sometimes it get in the way. Things get in the way. You
shouldn't be in a situation where you have to transgress Torah in order to be pursuing whatever you're pursuing. That's obviously a red line. You shouldn't be in a situation where you choose a career where you can't learn Torah, where you can't, meaning you guys are in an amazing position right now. You're young, you have your whole lives ahead of you, and you can choose the path that you want to go on where you can really balance the two together. And I think you should make decisions that way. I tell people all the time, yes, follow what you love and enjoy in terms of a career, but also certainly think about what career will enable you to also have time to learn Torah and make sure that you don't have to violate anything in terms of Torah, and you can be an upstanding person of Torah mitzvos and be involved in your community and be involved in your shul and yeshivas and even give shiur if you want to 100%. You should choose based on that, but also listen to that little voice which is telling you what you love to do. If there's something which you really love to do, try to find a way if you can try to balance the two together and bring Torah into that as well. Okay?
Anybody else?
Okay. You'll be in the Knesset at some point. I'd love to see you when you're there. If any of you guys, at any point while you're here, even beyond, if you have questions, criticisms, if you read things in the newspaper that we're doing which don't make any sense to you, questions, or, and here's the challenge, ideas. Okay, you have an idea for Israel, you have an idea for a law, you have an idea for whatever it is, please feel free to be judged. I'll leave some cards here with the email, Facebook, the like, and B'ezrat Hashem, we can continue the conversation, and you guys should just understand the unbelievable opportunity you have right now. Unbelievable opportunity you have right now, and you probably don't realize it, and it's a shame that you don't realize it, but the opportunity to sit and learn Torah in Eretz Yisrael after 2,000 years of Jews not being able to do that, and to be guided by people who are, from what I can tell, guiding you in a path which says, build yourselves up in Torah, and be a Talmid Chacham, and also pursue a career and parnasa and the like, that balance together, it's an unbelievable opportunity, and I hope that you guys take advantage of every single moment that you have, and thank you so much for having me.